Hi friends, it's Becky, and tonight I want to make a couple of 2-hole bead wrap bracelets using the Arctic Aqua Treasure Box from Potomac Beads. So there were two different versions of 2-hole beads that came in this box. We have these bibo beads that are small, and they've got a little round indentation on the side, and they are just going to be perfect for a straight shot 2-hole bead bracelet that I'm going to be separating with probably these sky blue Ceylon 11-0 seed beads and some of these frosty crystal glass drooks. So we're going to be using those for that one. And then for the other one, I wanted to use these Storm Duo beads for more of a sinewy, bendy 2-hole bead bracelet. And I'm going to be using these 8-0s that came in a previous Potomac Beads box. They are translucent slate. I think they're going to look great with that color. And some of these bicones in that like kind of a gray, smoky sort of color. So I'm going to be doing both of those. And I want to use button closures for these. So I have some vintage glass button assortments here that I was pulling out and trying to decide which buttons I wanted to use, and I'm pretty 100% sure that for these bibo beads I'm going to be using this teensy little glass button. It has a glass shank and this pretty AV finish on that design, and it's just going to look really great as a closure for this bracelet. And then for the second one, I was trying to decide between them. I've got this clear crystal one that has some really cool design with this gold on it. I've also got this darker blue one that has this super cute Scotty dog on it. And if I was going to be making a bracelet for my sister to wear, I would absolutely choose this, except when I flip it over on the back, it has a metal shank. And this metal isn't meant to be worn next to the skin because these were made for clothing. There's always supposed to be at least some fabric between the skin and this metal, so I can't trust this metal to be next to my sister's skin. So goodbye, Scotty dog, we will find a different use for you. And I am going to use this sort of matte gray button because it has a glass shank. So we're going to be using that one for this. It's going to be more like gray, and this one's going to be brighter blue. And so for this one, I'm going to use this bright blue beading wire. It's a medium beading wire. And for this one, I'm going to be using sort of a silvery gray beading wire on that. Now I'm going to get both of these started with y'all, and then I will finish them up on my own and I'll get them to the length that I want them to be on my own, because it's going to get really repetitive for you if I do the whole thing with you. And then I'll come back when it's time to finish them. So the way I'm going to start with this is I'm going to go ahead and pull off enough beading wire to go around my wrist about 5 times. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus some extra, so that, because this is going to be a little more sinewy, it's going to need to go around my wrist more than twice. 1, 2, plus some extra for the sinewy bits where it's going in and out like that. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that off here. And I'm only going to be using one crimp for these because we're going to start with the button in the middle of the wire. And let me just cut off the same amount of wire for my second bracelet while I've got my wire cutters out. All right. Scooch that a little bit out of the way. Just get the same amount of wire cut off. All right. Now, I'm using 8-0s for both of these. You could also do 11-0s if you wanted. I don't know that I'd go all the way down to 15 O's, but you could put some 6 O's in here with this. There are a lot of different ways that you can get some beads in here between your 2-hole beads on both of your strands, because it's just going to be 2 strands going straight along with some beads in between, but we're going to get that sinewy look by alternating like the size of the beads or how many beads we have between these 2 on this side. So let me get these bicones out because they're going to be an important part of that. And then these drooks over here for that part. And let's go ahead and get started. Let's do the straightforward one first. It's just going to be a straight shot, no sinewiness involved. And so to find the middle of this, I'm going to put both ends of my wire together and then drop the button all the way down to the end. Actually, no, we're going to do 2 crimps because I'm going to crimp the button onto here. So each of these will have 2 crimps. And my favorite way of crimping is using the magical crimper, but any crimps will do. And if you are comfortable with crimp covers, go ahead and use those. But I'm just going to use these 2x2 crimps. They are the ones that work with the magical crimper. It is my favorite way of crimping though. So I've still got my 2 wires together. And I'm going to slide my crimp onto both wires and move it all the way down to that middle part of my wire where I have my button. And that's the start of my piece. My bracelet is just going to be crimping this button on here so that I have part of my closure already started before I even get going. So to crimp, I'm going to center that crimp into my magical crimper, give it a smush, and it just crimps down the corners. Turn it to 90 degrees, give it another smush, and several other different angles. And I'm just going to keep smushing it until it stops resisting. And I've got a nice little ball of crimp. Alright, so then I'm going to get started on this by adding an 8-0, a drook, so just these 2mm beads, and an 8-0 onto each strand of wire. Come on, friend. And then I'm going to take my bibo beads and I'm going to put 1 strand of wire through each hole. Because there's 2 holes in there, so both strands of wire go through the bead, but in separate holes. But I am missing an 8-0 on that strand, so let me pull my bibo bead off. That 8-0 back. I thought I had picked that up, but I guess it slipped right off while I wasn't looking. That's why it's a good idea to look at what you're doing when you're making things. Alright. So now I've got those 2. I'm just going to repeat that same thing. I'm going to do an 8-0, a drook and an 8-0 on 1 strand. And I don't have to keep track of which strand is which or anything like that, just making sure that I get the same beads on each side. And then both strands through my bibo. And down to the end, just like this. So I'm going to keep going like this all the way until it will wrap around my wrist twice and still have room for a loop for closure. And that's what I'm going to do with this one. I'm going to set this aside for right now while I shift focus over to the other one, my other project. I'm going to work on both of these off camera and then come back once I've got them to the length that I want. So for this one, we're going to start the same way with our wire together. I'm going to put my button onto one end of the wire and just let it drop down to the middle. Whoop. And then take my crimp and put both ends of my wire through the crimp. Just keeping my both ends of the wire together while I slide this down to the middle. Once that's down about where I want it to be, I'm going to do the same thing with crimping the wire right above my button. And I'm leaving a little bit of room here on this button so that it has a little bit of movement. I don't want it so tight that the button won't move, because having some movement is going to make it a little bit easier for closing and opening this with one hand, because I am a person who puts on my bracelets by myself. Alright, now so for this one, I'm going to get it started sort of the same way, but I'm just going to put on 2 of these 8/0s on each strand just to get us started, so that the beads are a little bit more separated, or the wires are a little more separated from each other like that, because we're going to have our storm duos, and they are probably going to be sort of facing in different directions, because these beads are not straight up and down or the same. I'm going to be paying attention to how they go in here. So one of my wires is going to go into the concave section of one of these, and it's the same on both sides, concave and convex. And then we've got a hole on the convex end, and I'll put my second wire through that one. And then on the side where I went through the concave side first, I am going to put on an 8/0, a bicone, and an 8/0 right there. And then on the other side, I'm just going to put on 2 8/0s. I'm going to skip the bicone because we're going to make this rock back and forth. We're going to rock down to a bracelet. Oh, and I am missing one of my 8/0s. It must have flown off while the wire was flipping around. Do you see how one of these ends is sort of taller than the other? So now my next storm duo, the side that I went through the concave side first, I'm going to go through the convex side first for that strand. Or concave. I went through convex and then concave, so that the curves are opposite of each other. And then on the second one, we'll go through the convex side towards concave, the inner curve and outer curve, so that it curves like that. And now I'm going to flip it around and do it sort of the same way on the other side, where this side I guess you can always look at it as whichever strand, whichever piece of wire is coming out of the inner curve side, that's the one that you're going to do the 8/0 bicone 8/0. So 8/0 bicone 8/0, and whichever side is coming out of the outer curve, you're going to do just the 2 8/0s like that. And then you're going to look at which way those are curved, and you're going to go through the opposite curves for your next bead. So that is going to be, if you need to rotate your beads to make sure that you're going through the right way, well actually, so I went through that. I'm going to go through the concave side on this side instead of convex. And then the opposite one on the other side. And this way our storm duos will wave around and the bracelet will be sinewy as we go. To see how it's doing a little bit of an S curve to sort of mimic the S curve that we get in the storm duos. So I'm going to continue this. Again, it's the opposite one on each side, and it's really easy to just flip it over and do it the same way. When you've got the two sides that are together, the next one is going to be with that. So I'm going to keep stringing these along, and it's going to end up wavy. And if I need to like tighten it to help enhance the wave, I will do that. And then once I've got this long enough to wrap around my wrist twice, I'll come back here and we'll finish this up. Alright, so I have added enough beads for this to be able to wrap twice around my wrist, especially once I get a loop here on the end to go around this. And I've ended here with these 2-hole beads, and what I'm going to do is do another repeat of my sea bead round seed bead pattern here. Just on each one of these, I'm going to end with these instead of with the 2-hole bead right there, because that's what I started with right there in the beginning, and I'd like it to match that end with the other. Right. And now to do my loop, I'm going to do this loop with just the wire. Since I've got this nice blue wire, it's going to look really nice, and since this is such a small button, I don't want to overpower it by beading the loop. This one's got a larger button, so I am going to do a beaded loop on that one. So this one we'll do without the beads on it, which means I need to get both of these wires together like this, and then one of these wires I'm going to bend back and put through this crimp before I crimp it, so that I have one wire that's bent back on itself and one wire just going straight. And what I want to do is make sure that this wire will, the loop that I'm going to make, will fit around this button, but not be so loose that it comes undone, because this is going to be my clasp. Just moving that button out of the way, or that, okay, that's a little bit tight. Let's loosen it up a little bit more, like that. Okay, I think that's going to be the perfect size for that. And now I'm just going to go ahead and crimp this. I'm going to crimp it the same way I crimped it before. doing a single smush, and then just go around and round out that little crimp. All the way around, and then I've got some excess wire that I can cut off here. And here. Now I've got a little double wrap bracelet that it's a little bit on the loose side, but I like that. I like them looser when it's these double wraps like that. And it's got that really pretty button. And now this is the zigzaggy one that I used the Storm Duos with. And something that you might notice here is that there's some bare space on the wire. That's because they're not pushed down against each other up here on the end. As I went ahead and just kind of pulled the beads toward, I'm holding this end of my wire, and then just kind of push the beads down towards where it was. It helps it lock into place with the little bump outs, but it also gets them topsy-turvied so that they are all going in a little different way. And I'm just pinching against the bead with my fingers here. I'm going to do 2 8/0s on each strand of wire that I've got here. 1, 2, and 1, 2. And then I'm going to put my crimp bead through here. My crimp, not my crimp bead. And then we are going to figure out how many beads I need to put onto my wire to make a beaded loop. These are 8/0 seed beads, so probably, I'm just pushing these down to make sure that we are good. Probably I'm going to start with 15 and see how many will go around here. So I've got one of my strands. I'm going to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15. So I'm just going to bend my wire back on itself right here and get both of these ends together and see if that is enough to go around this bead button, and it is not. I think I need to add about 4 more of these. So let's try 4. Might be 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, so that makes 19. It's a prime number. And that, I think, is going to be big enough. Maybe just with one more bead. That gives me 20. Alright, so now that I've got my 20 beads on here, on this one strand, sort of pulling it taut, and then I'm going to bend back through my crimp, going back the other way to make this loop. It's like I did the other loop. It just has beads on it instead of being bare. Like that. And I want there to be some space between the crimp and these seed beads, so I'm just wiggling my fingernail right there between them to make sure that I can get my crimp in here without breaking any of these seed beads. And that worked pretty well, I think. Alright, so now that is all crimped, I can get rid of my excess wire. And I will have a second 2-hole bead wrap bracelet. Oop. I was like, did they come off? No, they didn't. I just dragged the end of my bracelet through my beads. There we go. And this is with the Arctic Aqua treasure box from Potomac Beads, using these Bibo beads and the Storm Duos. And all I did was just add some buttons, and for this bracelet I just added a different color of 8-ohs. Well, there we go. Hope you enjoyed this. I will put a link in the description to the Potomac Beads Treasure Edition. It is one of the subscriptions that I get. It is a monthly subscription, and you usually get some pretty fun beads to play around with, a lot of check glass beads. There's usually also some seed beads, some 2-hole beads, and some other really fun things to play around with. And they're usually very themed nicely and fun to do things with. So I'll put that link in the description below, and you can check those out. I'll also link my unboxing so you can see some of the other things that we got in this box. Anyway, that's all for tonight. I hope you're having a fantastic week, and I'll talk with you later. Happy beading!